Okay, I grew up in Texas, in near Lubbock, Tahoka, Texas is my home.
I know where Tahoka is.
You do?
I do.
Yeah, that was where I was born out there, and then from there I went into the Marine Corps or the Navy when I was drafted. I went into the Navy, but then they put me in the Marine Corps.
Oh.
And I stayed in the Marine Corps 3 years.
So when you got out, you had the GI Bill and you could go to college?
Then when I got out, she and I had Gaines, our first baby. He was about a year old, so we went back to Abilene, and I enrolled in the college.
Now, where did you all meet each other?
Well, I met a minister that preached at our congregation, Weldon Bennett, and he was out here preaching at Fullerton. And
really?
I went to see him, and when I did, I met her.
So you're from Fullerton?
Yeah, so
you're at home here.
Yeah, yeah.
So 9 months later, we got married.
And this was during your military service?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So part of the time that you were overseas, you were married and you were waiting for letters to hear about him.
And living here.
Yeah, I was on a carrier with 2 squadrons and 700 sailors, but the rest of the 2 squadrons were Marines.
Marines.
And then we stayed over there a year, and we came back, and it took another year before I was discharged.
What was the ship, the carrier you were on?
Puget Sound.
Was it you were in the Pacific Theater?
Yes.
So you, now I know that you finished at ACC in 1950.
That's right.
So now I guess Gaines was born out here in California.
Yes, he was.
Where were your other children born?
Well, Mike was born in Abilene.
Okay, we like that.
Yeah. And then Judy was born when we moved out to our first place preaching at a little place called Woodson. That's where she was born. And then we moved from there to Shamrock. And Shamrock, we stayed there 3 years. Then we moved to Wellington 3 years.
Now, I don't know where that is.
That's up about 90 miles east of Amarillo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then we moved. We moved to the first place. We lived in Shamrock, and then we went to Wellington for 4 years. Then we moved back to Shamrock for 3 years.
2 spells in Shamrock.
Yeah, and then we moved back. Then we moved to Olton.
Okay.
For 4 years.
Okay. Now you were preaching at churches in these
each one, yeah,
these places.
Yeah. The congregation at Olton was about 400 people.
Wow, that's a big congregation.
Very big congregation.
I didn't know Olton was that big.
Yeah, well, it was. They had a strong congregation.
Tell me about the town of Olton. What? I guess it's
just. It was just
farming?
the rich farmers that irrigated. They all became pretty wealthy, and that's what made it sort of an outstanding congregation.
Is it cotton or is it grain?
Well, it's cotton and grain.
Because I know there's some places you get far enough up in the panhandle it's too cold to grow cotton.
No, they have cotton and grain.
My dad preached in Hardeman County in Quanah.
Yeah.
For when I was in the first 4 grades of school, and the elders there were farmers who raised sheep and wheat.
Yeah.
He said they were great elders because they understood sheep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, tell me about the church at Alton. Now, it wasn't 400 when you got there, was it?
Well, yeah, it was that.
Oh, sure.
It was that large, and it kept growing because people were just interested. They were just active, and we had a lot of people move in there because of the irrigation and the farming and things like that.
Now, Gene says there's something to tell about Shamrock that we need to know.
Yes.
What is that?
I don't
That
know.
is in 1957, our son Tim.
Oh, we almost lost a child here. We skipped over him. Okay.
Yeah,
He was born.
Now, does that get it? Tim's the youngest, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Tim was born in Shamrock.
yeah.
Okay.
And then also,
And Judy was born in Wellington.
well, no, Judy was born in Gorman,
In
Texas,
Gorman,
by
okay.
Woodson.
Over by Woodson.
She
Okay.
was born in 1950.
Well, that's my year. I was
So-
born in 1950.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
also what was interesting in Shamrock, he had a weekly radio program.
Did
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
My dad had a daily radio program for a while in Minnesota
Yeah.
when they were planting a church up there, and he was on 15 minutes every day.
Huh.
That's a lot of
Yeah, it
that's
is.
Yeah.
a lot of lessons to write, I think.
That's right.
Yeah, it is. Well, now Mark thinks that the story in Alton is very important because the church was composed of people from different races in the 1950s. So talk to me a little bit about
Well,
how that came about.
What I did when I was at Shamrock, the African American people didn't have a congregation, so we started one in Wellington. And then when I left, I went back to Shamrock. Then when I went to Alton, I got that same preacher, his name was Brother Walker, to come out in Alton, and there was one lady that was a member of the church, but we had him to come out there, and he baptized 23
Wow.
of the black people, and we started a congregation right there.
Now,
And we also started a Hispanic congregation. but-
did these meet on separate premises, or did they meet together, or how did that work?
Well, they met in our building
Uh-huh.
for a while until we could help them to get stationed to get a place to rent down there.
Mark was telling me that there was this one lady who would come in and sit at the back sometimes when she was all by herself.
Yeah,
So then you'd call Brother Walker to come help start a larger congregation that
Yeah.
could
that's right.
meet independently.
Yeah,
I remember going with my parents to a black church in Quanah, and I was little, and my feet wouldn't touch the ground, and I would look down there, and we were outside, and they had those yellow bug lights strung up on strings, and it was dusty, and there was a blister beetle. You remember blister beetles?
yeah,
Going across that dirt, making tracks in that dirt. Isn't that funny what a little child remembers
Yeah.
sometimes like
And-
that?
But Brother Walker, he had a loudspeaker,
Really?
huge, and they called it Blacktown
he put it on his
car.
car, and he spoke to the whole little town. There wasn't very many people down there, but they called it, the colored town. That's what they called
Yeah,
Negroes then.
And
yeah.
he'd say, I can remember so well, he'd say, now I know all you people are listening. You may won't come into the building, but you're hearing me.
I wonder what his first name was.
William Walker.
William.
Yeah.
William.
Because I could look for other material about him someday if I know his
He
name.
was there at Wellington, and then later he died. I didn't know that he had died till after he had died, but
Yeah.
he was a very close friend of mine. We
Yeah.
thought a lot of him and his wife too.
What was her name? Do you remember?
I
what
don't
her name
remember.
I
was? And they lived in Wellington.
Yes.
Well, now you stayed in Alton 4 years. When you look back on that Alton time period, what do you think of as Oh, something you look back on with the most satisfaction from that period?
Well, I don't know, just we just knew a lot of the people, and I remember while we were there, that was when the young people were trying to outdo people, you know, running fast and nearly taking their life, and we lost eight of our young people because they tried to go over the railroad before the train came and killed all of them.
All in one car?
All in one car.
Oh my goodness.
And that was a big event that we remember that crushed a lot of people.
That was a big blow to a church to lose 8 kids all at once.
Yeah.
And then you had the weekly Bible study with all the kids that we would pick up from the school.
Oh, tell me about that.
Yeah, I started that there at Olton. I'd go every day when they'd turn out. I'd pick the children up. I've forgotten from.
Did you have a bus?
No, I just did it in my car.
Uh-huh.
I just picked up about 8 kids and bring them to the church and taught them scripture. They memorized. Some of them memorized the book of James and
wow.
and different. I taught them that do that, and that was a great time that we had of reaching out to people and helping them. That influenced a lot of the young people. In fact, one of the ladies that works there at the library, her name Huckabee. Her 3 sons were out there.
Really?
And they were in that. They lived out a little ways from the church, so they didn't get to come to those classes too much, but they came some.
Now, one of those boys' name is Stan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Elaine is his wife.
Yeah.
Elaine is Stan's wife.
Yeah.
I know he thinks a lot of that time and feels like it was very important to him.
Well, the class just continued to grow, so other parents then started using their car.
Had to have more cars.
Yeah, another started. So sometimes we'd have probably 30 kids there.
So like just right after school, but before supper?
No, I'd get them just as they turned out, like 3 o'clock or 3:30. And I'd keep them till 5 or something like that.
So you had your own after-school Bible class.
That's right.
Every day?
That's right.
Every school day?
Yeah, every day. I did that every day. And then her brother was a preacher back in Arkansas, and he knew I was doing that, so he started that. And he started on Thursday. And he had a Thursday school of picking up kids at that time until he died.
Wow.
And it was very successful.
Now, where was that, Gene?
That's Fayetteville.
In Fayetteville.
Yeah.
And what was his name?
Well, Ed Spurlock.
Spurlock.
But he really preached at Farmington, out from Fayetteville.
Yeah, I think Farmington and another place too.
But that's where they had the school. But he also had the school in Dallas. He preached in Dallas before moving to Arkansas.
Brother Spurlock did?
Yeah.
Where did he preach in Dallas?
He preached at, you name one of those places over there that has a, I've forgotten, it's well known, but it was a place where he preached for, I think, 3 or 4 years.
I might be able to look in Preachers of Today and find him. That would have been after the war.
Yeah.
Probably in the 50s.
Yeah.
50s and middle through 50s and 60s.
Yes, it was.
Well, as long as I have a first name and a last name, then I can try to fill in the details a little bit.
You might find him under A. E.
Afton Spurlock.
Afton
Spurlock.
Afton Edward, and you called him Ed. Yeah, I know about first names. I have one. So you left Olton. What year did you leave Olton?
I left Olton in '61, I believe.
And then where did you
I went to Grand Junction, Colorado.
Oh, wow.
And we stayed there for 3 years. And then we moved, of course I came back to Texas for meetings and things.
Uh-huh.
But we left there and went to San Pedro, where I preached for 20 years.
In
San Antonio.
In San Antonio. That's a long time.
I had a brother that was preaching in Harlandale, and he's the one that asked them to call me and said, let's get him down here. So we did, and we came down there.
Tell me about San Pedro.
Well, I was there for 20 years, and it was a great congregation. We just had so many lovely people there, and we were just so happy, and they were always happy with us, and we just did a great work there.
How big was that congregation?
It was about, I believe, about 100 when I moved there, but we built it up, and it probably was 300.
That's
And then we started another congregation out north. That is I've forgotten what congregation they call it, but it's the large congregation in that place now. But San Pedro's still there. It's down to about 130, but they're still there, still going.
Now, the Northside Church, I had a cousin who preached at no, that's in Austin where he was.
Oh, he does.
Wrong north side.
Well, it is. That's north side in San Antonio is what they named that.
Yeah.
Still on San Pedro. That was on the north side.
North side. And they have about 400 or 500, I think. It's a large.
It's a big congregation.
Yeah.
I think anything over about 400 is a pretty good sized church
Sure
these
is.
days. So now, did you have, at San Pedro, did you have several ministers on staff? Did you have an educational minister or associate?
We had an educational minister. Walton Crozier was the educational minister. He was a teacher. And then he trained Jeannie, and he had a training class that he trained others to teach. So we turned out a lot of teachers just with him. And we didn't have an assistant minister or anything.
And Stormy came, and then...
yeah. Now, what was Stormy's role when he worked with you?
He was assistant minister.
Okay.
And then, what was the other part?
Well, tell me a little more about what Stormy's job was. What kind of...
He worked with the young people, and then he sang, and he just did a lot of things. He finally, went to ACU, graduated, and then
still
when they dedicated the building, the library down there, he was down there, and so was the other person. I can't think of his name.
I remember seeing Stormy Higgins at the celebration.
Stormy Higgins, and then the other person, can't think of his name, but he was also assistant minister. So we had two assistant ministers.
Did you have a children's program at San Pedro that was? I'm thinking about, you had this program in Olton. You had after-school program.
Yeah, we had.
I know you're very involved with children here. So
yeah, we had a sort of kindergarten, sort of like we do here, from kindergarten to about the 5th grade or 6th grade there that we worked with.
That was a day school?
Yeah, it was a day school. What was her name? Sister Palmer worked that.
So you were in this. Now, is San Pedro located in the inner part of San Antonio?
It's in the east part.
In the east part of San Antonio?
No.
No?
North.
Which way?
North.
North
Kind of
part.
in the north side.
Yeah, north.
But then there was the further north than that.
Yeah.
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 And then with the preschool, kindergarten.
What did you call the preschool? Just San Pedro preschool, or
I don't.
did it have a name?
Oh, it was just Sister Ponder's school, really, and she was the one that had worked that up for a while, got there.
It met on the campus there at the
Yeah,
church.
right there. Yeah, and we just involved ourselves and helped her.
Yeah, yeah. So now, 20 years is a long time, but you're not there anymore.
No.
So how did that come to an end and the next stage happen?
He had had a heart attack.
Oh, you had a heart attack?
So,
Yeah, I'd had a heart attack, had open heart surgery,
Goodness.
and then I kept working, but then Mike was out here, and I stayed in touch with him, and he thought it'd be okay for us to move out here, so we moved out
Okay.
here.
So Mike said, come out to California.
Yeah.
Well, now I understand that this home you're living in now is your second home here, that you had lived in the,
Well, we bought one from Mike. Mike had bought a home over in Sherwood Village, and we bought it from Mike. He had it, and he just let us live in it. And then after we lived there a while, we put the money, some of the money we got out of our place, and we took it over.
yeah, yeah. And then you've been in this house a year or two, maybe?
Well,
3 years.
3 years already? That's hard for me to
I know.
imagine.
Yeah. When he fell at the accident, it was
Mhm.
a 2-story.
Oh, that's right, there were stairs, weren't there?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I tell you, I was in a house on this trip where there's this step down into the living room. I don't like that. It's just an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Well, he
So-
went backwards down
Yeah.
13 stairs.
Oh my goodness. I remember one time after my dad had been injured in a car accident and had gotten over that, but he had to retire then because he had a brain injury. And we lived in an upstairs apartment, and it had this narrow little staircase.
Mhm.
And it was always very scary to me trying to get up and down that staircase. I was glad when Mom and Dad moved to a different place. So now you're at Central Church here in Anaheim, is that right?
Well, we call it, it started Central Church, but we always call it Ball Road because
Ball Road.
because it's located on Ball
I
Road.
see. So now you call it Ball Road.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about how you found that congregation and got started being involved with them.
Well, the way we involved with it, we had a lady back in San Pedro that her daughter was out here,
Oh,
and so she said, "Well, if we come out here to come over
yeah,
to Ball Road,"
yeah.
and we did. And after we went there a few times, they asked me if I'd be interested in being a minister with them, and I did.
And what did you start with them in doing? Were you doing pulpit preaching?
Oh yeah. Well, at that time,
Uh-huh.
they had a pulpit preacher, but he was young and inexperienced, and they were dissatisfied with some of the ways that he had acted, and so they still kept him on 2 years after they had me to start
Mhm.
working.
Mhm.
But I started working immediately in preaching with
Preaching.
them. Yeah.
And your heart didn't give you any trouble about that?
Oh no, I went right on.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I had to have 5 bypasses during that time.
My goodness.
Yeah, over at Presbyterian Hospital, but I was back in 3 days. I was back up and worked.
Isn't that amazing what they
Yeah.
can do these days?
Yeah.
That's just amazing. Now, tell me about the congregation at Ball Road. How big is it?
Well, it was at that time. I've forgotten about how much we had. I think about 200 people, and then we had elders and deacons, and we just developed through the years. We just grew and enlarged and seemed like had a loving relationship with everybody, and we just had a great. We've had a great work there. We've been there since '81.
Now, is this a bilingual congregation?
Yes, we had, in fact, the Hispanic congregation was nearly as large as we were at that time. They were about 80, and we were 100 and something. And the Hispanic congregation has grown to be about 150 or more.
Wow.
And it still meets in the, we have two auditoriums. We have the one we started, then we have the large one. And they still meet in that one.
So they have services in Spanish, so you have two
Well,
services going
we've
on?
had both times. We tried to have together, but it didn't seem like people were that interested in it, so we just let them go back to having theirs, and we've had ours. And so we don't ever have, we sometimes have joint services and have things together.
Potlucks and things?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You hope you have it at some time when people are making tamales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christmas time.
Christmas time. Do you still preach?
Well, I haven't in a good while because I've had, I just haven't been able to. But it hadn't been long since I preached, and I go and on Sunday morning, and then I have prayer, you know, when they call on me.
Yeah.
And Mike wanted me to get a sermon up and preach again, so I guess maybe I will.
You'll have to do one if Mike says so.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, you worked here in Southern California with a school for preachers. Tell me about that.
Well, we started the Evangelist School of Preaching that is now at Buena Park. We started that over there.
I see.
And it stayed there for 2 years. And then, that was before I came here, they moved it to Buena Park because one of the elders, or two of them maybe, they thought there was too much, too many decisions separate than what the congregation was, and they thought it interfering with their work. So they asked Buena Park to take it, and they did. And it's been there ever since. But I have taught at the School of Evangelism. They have called on me to teach over there a class, and I've taught there for a number of years.
So what did you teach mostly? I know what my daddy loved to teach the best. What do you like to teach?
Well,
the best?
what they had me to teach over there was the Old Testament, and I taught all the books and all the new books, and then they had me to teach the Job, Psalms, and Proverbs, and then they had me to teach on training them on counseling, because my master's was in Christian counseling, so I taught a class on that over there.
Where did you do that master's degree, Brother Stanley?
I did it while I was I did it while I was at San Pedro. I mean while I was at.
While you were in San Antonio?
And
At
yeah.
what school did you do it at?
Well, I did it through the Christian Association. Yeah, and I got my degree. I got two of them. I got a first one and a second one, master's.
Tell me, let's see, there was another question I had. Now, in the School of Evangelism now, how many students are in that school, would you say?
Oh, we had about, at least about 100, probably 50 to 100.
Are they Spanish or English or some
They're
are
mixed.
Korean or
Mixed, yeah.
lots of different
Yeah, we had
nationalities?
African American and white people, Caucasian, and then we had Spanish.
Now, in your school at Ball Road, you have kindergarten through
Preschool
preschool,
through kindergarten.
preschool through kindergarten. So these are little bitty people.
Yeah.
How old?
2-year-old.
How old? They start at 2.
2.
2-year-olds through then kindergarten. So then when they get to first grade, they go to public school somewhere.
Yeah, well, at Ball Road, we're licensed for 60 students.
Mm-hmm.
We run that now. And Jeannie,
With the kindergarten would be 72.
What's the name of the school?
Leading Edge.
Leading Edge.
Leading Edge Christian School.
Leading Edge Christian School.
Mm-hmm.
Mike was one that had to
Name.
select that name.
That's a good name. I
Yeah.
kind of like that. It's a hopeful name.
Uh-huh.
Well, now, where do those children come from? Around in that neighborhood?
In that neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
So are they of mixed, various races?
Absolutely, yeah.
Types and kinds? How many languages do they speak?
Well,
We have English, Spanish, Korean, one will go from India,
Uh-huh.
and
The people that live closest to the church building,
come there.
are they professional people? Are they working class people? Or
Just working class people.
Because I don't know this part of California very well, so I don't really know
Yeah.
the various neighborhoods or communities
Oh.
at all. So I was just wondering about that. So as I just listened to this conversation for a little bit, what I hear is building churches, but I hear that children are a very important part of building up a community.
Absolutely.
Of faith. I wonder where you first learned that principle.
I think from my father and my mother, because we were 8 boys and 3 girls in my family, and we always had a very much of a love for each other, and they stressed, a loving nature in each one of us.
What was your father's occupation?
He was just a farmer,
Mm-hmm.
and but he did preach and sing, and he could play any instrument he ever picked up. So
Really?
he was a great
So he was musical, and he was
musical.
but he made his living by farming. I
Yeah.
guess cotton, if you're in Tahoka.
Yeah, cotton.
Lots
That's
of
right.
cotton.
He was a cotton farmer.
Yeah. So that means you kids worked on the farm,
That's right.
hoed cotton, picked cotton.
Pick cotton. That's
What's
right.
your all-time biggest day pick? How many pounds did you pick on your best day?
Well, I remember one time I had one big one that weighed 100 pounds.
Okay.
That's how long it was.
Now, is that pulled or picked?
That's pulled.
Okay, if it's 100 pounds pulled, that was a really great day.
That was.
That was a really great day.
Yeah.
I learned about pulling and picking from my grandmother, who
Oh.
was very careful to explain to me the difference between pulling the whole thing off or pulling
Yeah,
out
that's
the
right.
fiber. Yeah, that's important. Well, when you've mentioned your parents. Who else do you think had a really big influence on your life? People in particular that you remember as having maybe at a point of decision in your life?
Well, I think the ministers that they had come out there and hold meetings and work with us had a profound influence on
When
my
you were a
life.
child,
Yeah,
when you were growing up.
yeah.
Like, you remember hearing George True Baker? Did you know Brother Baker?
No, I didn't,
Yeah.
but
That's someone my mother remembers from about that time. I just wondered.
I had a number of others that you would probably remember, but Weldon Bennett, who came out here, and then I knew him, and that's the way I met my wife. And then other preachers and that came there was very influential in my life. Brother Bannister, John Bannister came
I
out
remember
there.
John.
He used to come out there every year and hold a meeting, sometime 2 or 3, and he was a very dear friend of ours. And my dad just loved him so much.
You know, my dad and John were dear friends.
Is that right?
And John was one of the few people who, when he came to see Dad in the hospital, you know, Dad would just, you know, he would just glow, kind of, you know,
Yeah.
even before he could regain the ability to speak.
Yeah.
And John was very faithful to come be with him,
Yeah.
and it didn't matter, you know, that Dad was so injured and impaired. John would just breeze in, you know what he's like, and just so hearty and full of energy.
Well, his dad, as it was his, anyway, the way we got to know him was through Brother Johnson, who knew him, and then he knew all of their people, so we seemed like everybody knew Brother Bannister, and they just had to have him back nearly every year.
He was at Skillman Avenue in Dallas most of the time that I remember being aware of him.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in the Dallas area myself,
Yeah.
so we see him fairly often. Well, when you look back on your seasons of ministry, not that they're over, because I know they're still going on. When you look back and think, my mother asked Dad one time, where do you think you did the most good? I think that's how she asked him. Or you could say, what do you look back on with a real deep satisfaction?
Well, I think just a deep satisfaction of just helping people to be informed of the gospel and to love the Lord and love the Bible, and just to see them grow in that way was the thing that satisfied and pleased me.
You seem to me like you have a lot of teacherly temperament about you.
Yeah.
Even though I haven't seen you at work, to hear you talk about it, that seems kind of the way that it.
Yeah, I think I've been classified as a teacher rather than a preacher.
Well, if you teach, it's because you think people can learn.
Yeah.
And that what they know, it will make a difference.
Yeah.
In their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell me something else you'd like for other people to know about you 100 years from now.
Well, that I just did all I could to establish the person of Christ in as many people as I could, and to let them know about His church, and that it was separate from denominationalism, but it's the one body that brings all believers together and to unite them in one, and they have His blessings, and He's present in their life. I think
that phrase, "establish the person of Christ," is not a very common phrase in my experience.
No.
Talk about that phrase just a little more.
Well, I think because it's been so difficult to teach people that Christ's church is the true church, that you have to approach it from phrases that will prejudice them, and the way that I think has helped is to let them know that the presence of Christ in the life of a person makes the true church, and not a denomination that there are so many of them. And so that's been my thrust, to help people to see.
When you want to help people see that, do you turn to the Gospel of John more often, or where do you find that people
No, I usually just emphasize to them and help them to see that it is taught throughout the Old and the New Testament that Christ was the silver cord that started with the promise made to in Genesis 3:15, and he goes all the way through, and that you have to understand that, and the beautiful places like Isaiah 53 and others, they help. And then even in the New Testament, like in Luke 24, where that Christ, when he was risen, the first thing he did was tell the women to go tell his disciples that he'd see them, and he told them to teach that. So it's been the theme that Christ has taught from the beginning. The Bible has.
The presence of Christ.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lovely thought to think about and to linger on.
Yes.
Miss Jean, do you think of something that we haven't covered that you'd like for people to know about Brother GB?
Well, he's been a great father.
You seem to have a very affectionate family.
He is a great husband and a partner and a team. We've always tried, I guess, to work together. So, yes.
Okay, it's your turn now.
Well, what I'd like to say that I have been through the last few weeks and months, I've been through some pretty close time to death, because I got to where I couldn't breathe, and they're giving me medication that makes me breathe better now. But she has stood by and helped me through this, where I couldn't have gotten through it had she not been here. And she takes care of me. She nearly has to do everything. I can't do very much for myself right now because I've fallen twice. I fell down the stairs and broke this.
I remember you had all those pins and screws in
your
arm.
There, and then I fell again and hurt myself here a while back, and I fall real easily, so I have to have somebody taking care of me. So, I just pray that God will give her strength, give me strength to accept what He has me to go through before my death. I would welcome death in what I'm going through with dialysis 3 times a week. I would welcome it, because I feel like that time is a burden on me and everybody else when you go through it, and then it's certainly a burden on her. But she has just stood by and keeps doing it, and the Lord has strengthened her and helped her.
Well, that comes from a long life together of service together, doesn't it?
66.
66.
In June.
Yeah. That's a great life. It's a great story.
Yeah.
We buried my aunt 2 weeks ago now. She died at the age of 97, 96, almost 97, and. Until she was 95, she was volunteering at the Christian Service Center there in Abilene many hours a week. And when she got to where she couldn't do that, she said, well, I'm ready to go. So she lived a well-rounded life.
Yeah.
A life full of service. And
that's great.
And a well-completed life, I guess you'd say. Imma Jean Mickey was her name. Do you know any Mickey preachers in your times in Texas?
Yeah, I knew a lot of them.
Well, Wesley was in Borger.
Yeah.
Not far from
and then there were twins, Wesley.
Yeah, Wesley and Leslie.
Leslie.
Yeah, those were my uncles.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And then they had a brother that preached too.
That's Wayne. That's
Wayne.
my dad.
Is that
That's
right?
your dad.
Oh.
Yeah.
Boy.
So I grew up in, Dad preached in Minnesota, and then he preached in Lovington, New Mexico, and then he preached in Quanah, Texas, up in Hardeman County, right up there on the Red River.
Yeah.
And then we moved to Dallas, and he worked with the Preston Road School of Preaching. That's the work he was doing
Yeah.
when his career was ended by this accident.
Boy.
And he and Mother, before they went to Minnesota, he and Mother had worked in Athens, Alabama, and Monahans, Texas, and in Lubbock. They planted the Fourth and D congregation in Lubbock.
Boy.
And then the church in Wewoka, Oklahoma, and another church in Oklahoma asked them to go up to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester and establish a congregation there, because so many people were coming to the Mayo Clinic at this terrible time in their life when they faced maybe, you know, a diagnosis that might
Yeah.
say their life was very near its end, and yet they didn't have their own faith community
Yeah.
there to support them.
Now, who was that preacher that got killed in that plane?
Eldred Stevens.
Eldridge Stevens.
Yes.
Eldridge Stevens
Yes.
is one of my favorite people too, and he helped us a lot. But Eldridge Stevens got killed flying back to Dallas,
Yeah.
and
And 3 other men, I think, with him.
3 other men with him.
It was just about their whole staff. But it was after my dad had been hurt and had left the school. And when Dad was preaching there, O.J. Russell was teaching, and Dad, and L.V. Pfeiffer, and of course Eldred and Tom Gallmer.
Yeah.
They were the faculty when Dad was working there.
Well, our oldest son, Gaines, he went to Preston Rhodes. He used to be a member there. He's still in Dallas, but he knew all about that, and he knew the things that happened.
That was a dark day when we heard about that.
Yeah.
That was a real blow. And it was they had a series of those. You know, when Dad was hurt, the whole church was just so distressed. And
Yeah.
in that season, we had people whom Dad had visited in the 1940s at Mayo Clinic, who, when he was hurt in 1971, called and wrote and said, "We remember when you came to see us, and we want to remember you now that you're hurt." It was really sweet. It was, hospital ministry is an amazing.
Yes, it
It's
is.
an amazing ministry.
Yeah.
And working with children, children remember people who taught them and who encouraged them.
Well, the hospital, talking about that, when I moved to Shamrock, I started visiting the hospital, and I'd visit everybody in there. They just had the members of the church, and some preachers had just visited them. I told them, I said, I'd just like to visit everybody in here, so I did. And I think I influenced a lot of people by that, and I had a 30-minute program every Sunday morning, so that sort of acquainted people with who I
They'd
was.
know your name, you'd say
Yeah,
your name.
and so the hospital, it's been a point of my being in contact with people.
When you were in school at ACC, you had some important people who taught you.
Yeah.
I wonder which of those you felt like you were most impressed with or influenced by, or whose teaching was most useful to you in your life of ministry.
Well, Brother Bale was one of the...
That's R.C. Bell?
R.C. Bell. He was one of the older men that influenced me very much. He was so kind and he was so understanding until he left an imprint upon me on that. I think Lemoyne Lewis was one of the greatest teachers, and he influenced me so much.
Do you know that we are now broadcasting his lectures?
You are.
On the internet. You can go to our digital archive and listen to his voice Once again, we have almost there are 260 something lectures online.
Is that right?
I'll tell Mike where they are, and you can listen. You can't download them yet because we're probably going to have to charge a little fee for that, and we don't have that set up yet. But you can listen to them and hear him speak, or you can search for a topic, like if you wanted to hear him talk about, you know, the Russellites or something. You know, you could look it up, and then you could hear that lecture.
Now, what is his brother's name?
Jack.
Jack. He's still living.
Jack is still living in Memphis.
And he went with us on we went on a tour.
Did you go on one of the Holy Land trips with Jack?
Yeah,
His 50th birthday.
Boy, that's rich, isn't it?
Yeah, I went. That's right. I got in River Jordan my 50th birthday. Yeah. And Jack P. Lewis, he is such a intelligent person. You know, he's just like Lemoyne Lewis. He's so educated in the language in Greek, and so was Lemoyne, until they bring in things that you just never thought of otherwise.
Yeah, a real depth of background in the languages and culture.
Yeah.
And Shamrock and San Pedro sent us.
Oh, how sweet.
That was his 50th.
What a great birthday present.
Yeah.
That's a testimony, isn't it? When a church loves you like that.
Yeah.
All the congregations that we worked with.
When the church in Rochester, Minnesota reached its 50th anniversary, they wanted to bring Mother and Dad up for the celebration, and Dad's health was so bad that they couldn't go. But they said, we'll pay your way, we'll bring you up, we want you to see. Because they still have a vibrant hospital ministry, and they have now 2 guest houses for people who need housing, who coming up from the south, you know, and to come to the clinic. Several people in Memphis where we went to church had been there, and they call it Hands of Compassion.
Yeah.
That's what they call their guest house.
I'll say.
Real story. It interests me that you know, my family and yours haven't crossed paths before. Exactly.
Yeah.
Except you knew my uncles, of course. I guess you'd come back to the lectureship every year at ACC, nearly, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
That was. Did you come to the teacher training workshops at Abilene when you were?
Well, sometime I was able to, and then sometime my schedule wouldn't allow me to.
Yeah. Did you do some gospel meetings in the summer times?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did a lot of that in Oklahoma too.
Did you?
Yeah.
I remember traveling.
In fact, I was the one that started the boys' home in Westview Boys' Home.
In Oklahoma?
Yeah.
Westview Boys' Home.
Westview Boys' Home.
How did that get started?
How did it get started?
Because you weren't in Westview.
Yeah, we had a school, and they weren't using it. And I asked them if we could, and I was working with people that had come through and traveling on 66, and I'd find kids that needed a place to go, and I couldn't get anybody to keep them, even
though. So you were in Wellington or Shamrock?
No, that was while I was in Shamrock.
In Shamrock.
And so.
Westview's just over then in Oklahoma.
Well, yeah, and then of course I'd been in Wellington, and then I'd been in Shamrock, and so I knew about that school because we had a school teacher that we're acquainted with him. I don't know in what capacity, but he said, well, this school is not being used, and said, we're just going to close it up. And I said, well, could we open it up for kids that or we can't find any place for them? And he said, sure. So we got it sort of organized, and we started it, and that's the way it started. Right now, it's like 300. I think it's 300.
Really?
Yeah, they have people have given them land, and so they've worked out. And you can look at Westview Boys' Home, and it's extended. I looked about it not too long ago, and he's just impressive.
Is there a church that has oversight of that, or is
Well, the
it-
Hollis,
oh, in Hollis,
Oklahoma,
Oklahoma? Mhm.
but they weren't that interested in it, but we got them interested in
Yeah,
it.
yeah. And now they're stuck with it, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, but they're not over it now. I think it's in, maybe they have just a manager. We had
I
some,
think it's a corporation.
Yeah, probably.
Or- yeah,
Nonprofit
we had
corporation, yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's interesting. I just, you just never know what's gonna turn up next.
that's right.
Well, I know we've kept you talking here for over an hour, so I'm gonna let you rest, but I just,
Okay,
I wanted to thank you for this time and for these reflections. It's very important, and it means a lot to me, and I think it'll mean a lot to people who get to hear it
well,
a long
thank you.
time from now.
Thank you. I appreciate your interest.